Folks to take their seat and we'll get underway, please. Sorry, I'm creeping over.
I have the names for you. Okay, you already did that. I was going to say creep away, but
Okay, creep away, yeah, that's right. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, and I'm going to welcome our guests in a moment. But I first wanted to go through a couple of quick things. First, to say apologies to everyone for the late start. It was business of the House that kept all committee members in until just now. I wanted to outline the time that we have today. So we've lost a half an hour because of this, and I've heard a number of committee members and others express a desire to finish on time at 5:30. So we're going to have to absorb the loss of time within our allotted period. I don't want to take any time away from the presentations from our guests. The way that the afternoon will roll out is that what was intended to roll out was that the first group would present for 10 minutes, followed immediately by the second group for 10 minutes, leaving 40 minutes for the committee members to answer questions, and that would be an hour. Then we'd repeat that again for the second two groups. Because we've lost half an hour, we're going to have to remove 15 minutes from each of the 40-minute question periods, leaving 25 minutes for questions. And what we'll do is just roll through the I'll ask the committee's preference on this. Last week, I tried to accommodate a time loss by shaving minutes, and that didn't seem to go over very well. So it was my intention today just to stick to the minute allotments that we adopted in the routine motions until we run out of time. So in other words, we'd let that run for 25 minutes, and then we would simply stop and move on to the next presentations. Does that sound okay to folks? Okay, thank you. Then that's what we'll do. I'm also going to get a little stricter about timekeeping. So for the benefit of our guests, we have the committee members have agreed upon ahead of time a 7 minutes per question for the first 4 questions, followed by 5 minutes per question. This is a way to maintain fairness amongst all members. So I will be letting you know when you've got a minute left in the 7-minute period, and then again when there's about 5 or 10 seconds left, so we can finish up. And I'm really going to keep it to those 7 and 5 minute segments. And I would just invite committee members to try to keep the opening soliloquies prior to the questions as short as possible and get right to the questions, so that we can hear the most that we can from our guests. So with that. With that throat clearing and introductory comments, I'm very pleased to welcome our first presenters, which are from the ITK. Thank you very much for being with us. And I guess it is Nathan Obed, the president, that will be presenting to us today. Is that right? And do you have other folks that will be? It's just you for ITK. Okay, yes. Very good. So at your pleasure, please. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having Inuit Tapiri Kanatami here this afternoon. I look forward to the discussion later, and I want to thank you for the invitation. ITK is the national representational organization for Canada's 60,000 Inuit. We are spread across Canada's Arctic, or as we call it, Inuit Nunangat, Nunatsiavut in northern Labrador, Nunavik in northern Quebec, Nunavut, which is its territory, and also has a land claim body within that territory, and then the Inuvialuit region in the western Arctic. The foundation of our relationship with the federal government is our land claim agreements, and they were signed from the first being in 1975 to the last being in Nunatsiavut in 2006. The relationship that we have is one that is based on the Constitution, and the organization that I represent represents a very defined link between each one of our beneficiaries, the members of each one of our 4 land claim agreements, and their regional bodies that represent them, to the regional bodies that elect the national Inuit leader, which is myself, and those regional bodies also elect an international leader in the Inuit Circumpolar Council of Canada. So we have a very tight governance structure, and Inuit also on the board that I'm president of, have the insight and perspective of our women with the Paututut Inuit Women of Canada and also the National Inuit Youth Council. So in these days of debate and discussion about who represents whom and the way in which Indigenous peoples of Canada choose to represent themselves, I present you with a very clear model from the individual Inuit who live in Canada to the national body that is an unbroken chain of representation, an Inuit democracy, if you will. Our rights stem from the Constitution. We also draw from international law through UN declarations and UN conventions. We also have this shared space, as I mentioned before, through our comprehensive land claim agreements. We have a shared space that sometimes is focused on Indigenous and Northern affairs, and often Indigenous and Northern affairs is the place where everyone goes for sort of the direction on the Inuit perspective. I'm always worried about that, and the way and because so many different government departments play a role in the way that Inuit services are delivered, in the way that policies and programs are developed, and then the overarching relationship that Inuit have with the Crown is actualized. And so while the lead, per se, has always, in land claim implementation, has been INAC and its many different iterations, I think moving forward it would be safe to say that we would hope that this is expanding out and onward beyond just one department, because while the nuts and bolts of land claims may happen here within Indigenous and Northern Affairs, they spread out across the entire federal government. Our population is unique. Our median age is 23, and that is a very different median age than the rest of Canada. Our population has grown 26% between 1996 and 2006, and so we have a very young and rapidly expanding population. We also are unique in that many of us didn't live in settlements prior to World War II, and so many of our people grew up on the land or were born in igloos or sod houses, and so the story that you often hear about the very romantic version of Inuit does exist still in our land, even though the reality for us of the younger generations is very, very different. So the challenge of our organization is to respect the relationship we have with the land, our traditions, the fact that over 60% of our population still cites as its mother tongue Inuktitut, which is the Inuit language in its many dialects, and the fact that we still feel like we live with the environment, and that we are still coming to terms with this new reality of melding Southern Canadian values and Southern Canadian governance concepts with the way in which we've always lived our lives. So our organization at the national level works with each of the 4 regions to understand what our national concerns are. And we just have released our strategic plan today. And in that strategic plan, we talk about 7 different objectives and priority areas that we have that we'd like to move at the national level. Before I get into those 7 objectives, I'd just like to pause on the relationship piece. Politics may change very rapidly, but bureaucracies, programs, policies, and the implementation of Indigenous rights move at a very different pace. And so we are very encouraged by the recent change of events that has allowed Indigenous peoples to participate in events such as the climate change and discussions last week in Vancouver, or the fact that the Prime Minister came and visited and participated with us and our board at a meeting at our offices in January. These are all welcome, and these are all signs of hopefully things to come. But we know that there are systemic problems that we need to overcome with the way in which we interact with the Government of Canada, the way in which programs and services and terms and conditions from Treasury Board all roll out in different ways for Inuit than they might for First Nations, without the consideration of Inuit when those different programs or services or terms and conditions are being drafted. We think that there should be a broad standard across each one of the federal government departments that ensures that whenever we go to talk to a minister or when we talk to a deputy or down at the program level, that there is a structural relationship and that it doesn't vary from person to person or from department to department. Our rights don't fluctuate that way, and so therefore our engagement with the federal government should not be at the whim of a public servant or the whim of a particular minister, or limited by the lack of understanding about the realities of Inuit who don't live on reserves, who entirely are dictated, the relationship is dictated by land claim agreements and public governments. There is a self-government in Nunatsiavut, but still, the way in which we interact with Canada should be at the forefront of the federal system as a whole.
Gerald, I have to let you know that there's about a minute and a half left in your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So I will now speak very quickly about the objectives that we are laying out today as our strategic objectives moving forward for the next 3 years. Suicide prevention is our first objective, to take action on suicide prevention. We will be releasing a national Inuit suicide prevention strategy this summer, and we have great belief that this particular strategy and accompanying action plan will be able to create a new path and a new direction, and one that denormalizes suicide in our communities and reduces the rate of suicide for Inuit as a whole. We also have a housing crisis, and so our second objective is to improve access to appropriate housing for Inuit. Our third objective is to work towards reconciliation, and that's reconciliation in the lens of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission 94 calls to action, but also reconciliation amongst ourselves. So not all the things that we do as a national organization are outward focused and lobbying for others to do things, that we also can do things as Inuit to bring ourselves together and to reconcile for the things that that may have gone wrong within our families, within our communities, or across our regions. Our fourth objective is self-determination in education. We have a national strategy on Inuit education, and we have a long ways to go to implement its recommendations. And so we look forward in the next 3 years to making substantial increases to student attainment, to curriculum development, and to the way in which our language is infused and our culture is infused in all that we do. Our fifth objective is protecting the Inuit Nunangat environment, and that links in with climate change. It also links in with the protection of our wildlife. We are a land-based people. We are of the environment, and we want to be a part of the Canadian conversation on climate change, not just as a people, but as a core component of all the work that happens. Our sixth objective is strengthening Inuit self-determination in research. Evidence drives decision-making, but evidence also drives the creative process in which we solve our issues. And we still have massive gaps in how we understand key components of our lives that we want to improve. We also have a fundamental disconnect with the academic community and also sometimes the federal government system for research in relation to how it functions versus how we want it to function. So we want to improve those relationships. And our seventh objective is to enhance the health and well-being of Inuit families and communities. So We are working with Health Canada. We're working across different departments to already work on these issues, but I look forward to working with each and every one of you and trying to improve the well-being, the health, and the economic status of Inuit in Inuit Nunavut.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obed. Much appreciated. We're very pleased to hear as well today from the Métis National Council, and speaking will be Mr. Chartier, the President, and also Mr. Weinstein, the Chief of Staff. So please proceed. I'm going to turn the timer around so you can see sort of how your time is going as well, okay? Thank you.
It doesn't do any good.
Can't see it?
But that's fine. Anyway, thank you for the invitation. And I assume there's a number of people here new to the Parliament and possibly new to the Métis Nation. So just very quickly, we're an Indigenous people which evolved into a new and distinct nation in primarily Western Canada. Our homeland, traditional homeland, is now encompassed by the 3 prairie provinces and extends into a contiguous part of British Columbia, Ontario, the Northwest Territories, and the Northern United States. And basically, the Métis National Council is the governmental body mandated to represent the Métis Nation, and we do so at the national and international levels, and we engage in intergovernmental processes in Canada, such as the First Minister's meeting on climate change, which took place last week. We have a lot of challenges. We've been dispossessed from our lands and resources in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The exception is, of course, in Alberta, the provincial government in 1938 established Métis settlements. There's currently 8 Métis settlements in Alberta. That's an exception, but that's a provincial government initiative. After 1870, after I guess the gall of the Métis Nation in defending itself against Canada, we were treated as individuals, no longer as a collective, and we were dealt with through a script process in contradistinction to treaties entered into with First Nations as collectivities. We were dealt with as individuals, and the script process was meant by the federal government to extinguish our Aboriginal title. We are challenging that. We filed a case in 1994, the Morin case in northwest Saskatchewan. It's sitting there because we don't have the money to take it forward, but nevertheless the challenge is there in Blais. Unasked, the Supreme Court of Canada in 2003 stated that script speculation and devaluation was a sorry chapter in Canada's history. In Pauli, on the same day, the Supreme Court of Canada stated that Métis are full-fledged rights-bearing Aboriginal peoples, and their rights are no less than First Nations or other Aboriginal peoples' rights. In Cunningham, in 2013, the Supreme Court of Canada stated that the Métis have the right to determine its own citizenship. And in Daniels, which is currently before the Supreme Court of Canada, the Federal Court Appeal Division stated that the Métis fall within the Section 9124, which is Indians and the lands reserved for the Indians, and therefore the federal government, Parliament, has the necessary constitutional authority and responsibility or jurisdiction to enter into a government-to-government relationship with the Métis Nation. And of course, that appeal was argued October 8th last year, and we're waiting currently a decision, unless, of course, the current government withdraws its cross-appeal. CAP appealed it to expand the ruling. Canada counter-appealed to say neither the Métis or non-status Indians fit within that term. And I did write a letter to the Prime Minister in November asking that the cross-appeal be withdrawn. Have not heard to date whether it will or will not be. Exclusions. Métis Nation is not a stranger to exclusion. The only veterans in Canada from World War II that haven't been dealt with are the Métis Nation veterans residential schools. Métis residential schools are excluded from the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, excluded from the June 2008 apology in Parliament, and excluded from the mandate, and hence also the recommendations or call to actions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission were excluded from the majority of federal programs such as First Nations and Inuit Health Branch, post-secondary education assistance. And we'd invite a cap if we had something to cap. But in any event, we're also excluded from the various land claims processes. Again, our only recourse being the courts. And like I say, the 1994 statement of claim is just sitting there because there's no way that we can afford to move forward. Talking about priorities now on the positive side and embracing the change in government. During the campaign, the Liberal Party stated that Canada must complete the unfinished work of confederation by establishing a renewed nation-to-nation relationship with the Métis Nation. And in your kit is the platform or the policy put out by the party, and we're of course looking to the government now to act on it. So there are a number of commitments, and it was unprecedented. And in fact, we have been working with the Trudeau government to put it into action. I guess the most critical test of the policy will be whether the federal government is willing to negotiate and reach just and lasting settlements of the unique rights and claims of the Métis Nation. As its Métis Nation policy rightly recognizes, it is essential to how reconciliation with the Métis people will finally be meaningfully advanced and achieved. The policy committed the current government to immediately establish a negotiations process between Canada and the Manitoba Métis Federation in order to settle the outstanding land claim of the Manitoba Métis community as recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada in Manitoba Métis Federation, and Canada decided in 2013. In fact, the government is acting quickly to engage the Manitoba Métis Federation in this process, and we look forward to the results. This government also committed to establish a federal claims process that sets out a framework to address Métis rights protected by Section 35 of the Constitution, which recognizes Métis self-government and would resolve outstanding Métis claims against the Crown.
Mr. Chartier, I should tell you that we're at about 7 minutes now.
Yes, and okay. I would have finished on time, but I'll still try. It extended the mandate of the Ministerial Special Representative on Métis engagement, Mr. Tom Isaac, who had been appointed by the previous government to explore the development of a Métis Section 35 rights reconciliation framework. Given the commitment of the present government to move on the settlement of our rights and claims and advancing Métis Nation self-government, we are keenly anticipating the upcoming report of Mr. Isaac. The Métis Nation policy also contained a number of important commitments to us that we trust will be addressed in the upcoming federal budget. It committed to invest $25 million over 5 years in the Métis Economic Development Strategy that will identify strategic federal investments in Métis Nation financial institutions in order to enhance Métis entrepreneurship and Métis participation in business development and economic growth. It committed to renew the Aboriginal Strategic Employment and Training Strategy assets, including nation-to-nation and distinctions-based approaches that respect the unique realities of First Nations, Inuit, the Métis Nation in the delivery of these programs and services to our respective communities. With the renewal, the government has committed to add $50 million per year to assets. It committed to fulfill the commitment in the Kelowna Accord to enhance existing scholarships and bursaries available to Métis students at various colleges and universities across Canada in partnership with the Métis Nation. It also committed to convert the year-to-year program funding for our Métis Nation registries into a permanent program. The Prime Minister invited the Métis National Council to a meeting with him and a number of his ministers in December of 2015 in order to elaborate on how these commitments could be implemented in the most meaningful way. So we are definitely looking to the budget for the confirmation of these important investments in our social and economic development. The Prime Minister and his ministers have also engaged the Métis National Council together with the Assembly of First Nations and the Inuit Petitkanatami, in meetings with the provincial health ministers on a health accord and with First Ministers on climate change and clean growth. We appreciate the spirit of partnership surrounding this engagement, which is consistent with the new nation-to-nation relationship sought by the Prime Minister. Moreover, inviting only these three Indigenous governments or representatives of Indigenous governments of the three constitutionally recognized Indigenous peoples to participate in these intergovernmental forums is consistent with a nation-to-nation approach and the inherent right of self-government. In closing, the Prime Minister has stated on a number of occasions since coming into office, and I quote, "There is no relationship more important to me than the one with First Nations, the Métis Nation, and Inuit. It is our hope to continue working in that spirit with the government to achieve rapid progress." Merci, merci, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chartier. I very much appreciate your comments on behalf of the chair, and on behalf of the committee, rather. And so I wasn't clear if you were going to be splitting time with Mr. Weinstein, but we're out of time in any case. So let's roll right into the questioning. We have some eager folks with good questions, and the question order will begin with Remy, please.
I'd like to thank you for participating in this meeting. It's highly appreciated. If I may, I would like to ask my questions in French. That'll be easier for me to express myself clearly. Mr. Obed, my first question is for you. You listed a whole series of challenges, and you listed the actions associated with these challenges. I'd like to hear about how the government could support you in achieving your action plan.
I won't go list by list, but I think there are a number of key departments that can play meaningful and substantive roles in helping us achieve success in our strategic plan. And I think that we're very practical and focused in the way that we would ask for that support. We recognize that the federal space is limited in what it could do for, say, K through 12 education, or any other situation in which provincial and territorial jurisdiction is the sole jurisdiction of the issue. But there are many things that we can do to overcome gaps in outcomes. So, and I will take Health Canada as an example, where there are a number of different programs and services that are designed to close gaps in health outcomes, specifically for First Nations and Inuit. A lot of those programs could be improved, and there has to be a discussion with Inuit about the things that are of the biggest priority to us. I'll focus on suicide prevention. There are very few dollars that are available for overarching suicide prevention measures for Canadian Inuit. In the past, we have had small pots of funding that have been rolled out to different territories or provinces, but when we're looking at 11 times the national average for our suicide rates, and we're thinking of it as a crisis in jurisdictions such as Nunavut, more action needs to be taken. Sometimes I've asked the question, when is a crisis actually a crisis? When is the federal government going to help us when we call out for that help? How bad does it need to be? You know, our tuberculosis rates are about 140 times the national average. Our suicide prevention rates I've already mentioned. These are human challenges that do have solutions, and we can use evidence and we can use best practice to be able to design interventions that get us to the place that we need to be. Sometimes federal investment is secondary to restructuring the way in which you help. But sometimes investment is needed, and in the case of housing, I think there is a role for the Government of Canada to play a significant driver in changing the way that our housing happens across the Arctic. Inuit Nunangat has a housing crisis. As I said, our communities were created mostly after the 1950s. We have huge infrastructure deficits, and housing is one of the biggest. How are we going to create a sustainable housing structure in Inuit Nunangat? How are we going to go beyond just social housing? Are we going to create more new solutions, whether it's private housing or whether it's a combination of social housing to home ownership? I think that we can be, or housing design, I think we can be innovative, and I think that we can find ways to make it cheaper to ensure that this problem, this crisis, doesn't persist.
Okay, thank you. There are a few minutes left. We're at 4:25. If you had another question, you.
Question, M. Obed, encore.
Again, a question for Mr. Obed. I'd like to hear about your education strategy. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the main objectives, and once again, how could the federal government support you in the area of education?
It's a lifelong learning, holistic approach to increased educational attainment for Inuit. And we focused in the early years on bridging the gap between parents and students in the education system, because with the legacy of residential schools and the newness of formal education as a whole, we still have to create a path where parents feel as though it is in their best interest and in their children's best interest for there to be a strong bond between parents and children and the education system. So we've done quite a bit of work on that. I think the work that is going to really change our society for the better would be in early childhood and creating the best possible early childhood education program in Canada or even in the world for Inuit children. I talked a bit about our population growth. I talked about the socioeconomic challenges that we have. We have an educational attainment rate for graduation of high school that is probably between 25 and 40%, depending upon which region we look at. So if you look at the majority of our children that aren't reaching grade 12, and trying to understand why that happens, there has to be a focus on early learning and then learning in our language and in our culture. So curriculum development, accreditation issues for teachers, ensuring that our language is the primary language of instruction. All of these things play significant roles in the way in which we want to address attainment for education. Post-secondary is another area that we focus on as well. So the lifelong learning model is the one that we've ascribed to in the way in which we've developed our strategy and the way we want to implement it.
Perfectly timed, Mr. Obed. Thank you. The next question is from David Yurdiga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first round of questions will go to Mr. Obed. Obviously, resource development in the Arctic has brought many benefits, and with any development comes environmental concerns. And can you tell us what benefits resource development has brought to the Inuit, along with some of the environmental challenges?
The way that our land claims agreements are structured is that we have a very clear path towards the very beginning of the discussion about whether or not Inuit would like to see a development on our lands, to the environmental assessment process, to the development of impact and benefits agreements and overarching financial and other considerations for training and employment. So throughout the process, our land claim agreements and our overarching Indigenous rights play a very central role in the way in which any development happens across Inuit Nunangat. There are examples of great successes for our people, and in the co-management and the business development sector, and also individually for jobs and prosperity. There are also huge challenges that have come with a boom-bust cycle of natural resource economy, also the transition from communities that haven't had any experience with major projects to ones that have a reality of a mine in their backyard. So I would say that the way forward must include natural resource extraction, because that's the way our land claims are structured, that we are partners in development, that we do benefit from it, and then it benefits our self-determination. It builds our assets that we're able to then use to do programs in our communities, to build our language, to do any number of things that we wish for our society. Just as the funds from natural resource extraction projects help fund the government and the way in which the government can spend money on the priorities that it sets for its people. So we're partners in this with you, and I think that that is a good thing for Canada. But I think there are a lot of challenges that come from natural resource extraction in the Canadian Arctic. It's such a fragile landscape, especially in the face of climate change. But we have the bodies in place to be able to work through all of those problems. It's just ensuring that there's respect for the co-management process and for the Inuit processes that started with land claims that are in the end of the day should be the ones that are respected by all.
Well, thank you. With development, there's always benefits as far as jobs goes. And what role does the ITK, if any, play in supporting Inuit businesses in the resource or service sectors?
ITK is a representational organization. We also advocate for Inuit interests. And so in our advocacy efforts to the federal government, we play a role in ensuring that any sort of economic development or business development programs or initiatives are conceptualized and then implemented in a way that Inuit can benefit from them, and that Inuit businesses or Inuit organizations can make the most of. And so that is the limited role, but the essential role that we play, whether it's ensuring that there's funds for human resource development, or within INAC that some of our businesses can access different programs that allow for major projects to happen, down to individual businesses. That is the role that ITK plays.
How much more time do I have?
You've got about 2 more minutes.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, the Species at Risk Act came into effect in 2003, and can you give us some insight on who sits on the National Aboriginal Council for Species at Risk, and how members are selected, and is this a term appointment?
Sorry, I don't have that information for you. I can get that information for you.
Okay, that'll be good if you can. And going back to the education component, we understand that we all want our children to do better and our grandchildren to do better. So what is the major hurdle for getting our young get a furthered education? I mean, it's one thing to get your high school education, but also to further their education in post-secondary to obtain the jobs that are better paying, and so it also encourages their children to do the same. So what are the major hurdles that or a stumbling block for the youth today?
You could start in any number of places. I'll give an example of in Nunavut, where many Inuit who speak Inuktitut at the home and will always identify Inuktitut as their first language, go to school from K to 3 or K to 4 in their language, but then transition in grades 4 or grade 5 to English, and there is no real structure of language of instruction in their own language beyond a language art, beyond that time. And so we need to be able to create a system across Inuit Nunangat, across our 53 communities, where our language is respected in the same way that French and English are respected in southern Canada as language of instruction, to reach the the same outcome and the same goal. We have an immense amount of other challenges, such as small communities with limited capacity for specific biology or chemistry or math when you get to grade 10, 11, and 12. But those we hope that we can overcome through distance education, through access to online or web-based satellite-based learning. So we can overcome these challenges, but there are some fundamental problems with our education system that don't allow our children at the end of grade 12 to have the same level of credentials. And I don't think that we can say that the way that we've provided education is fair. We expect our children to learn through curriculum that wasn't designed for them. We accept them to learn in a southern-based environment without having that balance between learning about a new culture and a new way of learning, but also having the foundation of their own language and their own culture and their own community in the classroom with them from K to 12. So there are a number of things that I think we can improve to ensure that our children have a fair chance of getting a high-quality education that is transferable anywhere in Canada.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. And Mr. Obed, I was just told by our wonderful research staff here that they'll find the answer for us about who sits on the Species at Risk Committee. So you can cross that off your to-do list. We'll take care of that and let David know. Yeah, thank you. The next question comes from Charlie Angus. Please, Charlie.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for this excellent presentation. Mr. Chartier, I had wanted to start with you. One of the volumes in the Truth and Reconciliation was the treatment of the Métis in the residential schools. The Prime Minister is committed to meeting all the recommendations, and one of that recommendations was about those who were excluded, the day scholars. The Métis were excluded. Can you just fill us in quickly, because this process is winding down, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is once it's wound down, there will be no further claims accepted. Has there been any discussion with the present government about resolving the exclusion of the Métis, and what would we need to do to make sure that the Métis who suffered through the same situations are treated fairly?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, actually, if you look closely, you will see a sliver of a volume in the final report. Basically, I think I read it differently. I don't read that the Métis really are being dealt with in that report, other than stating they should sign on to whatever everybody else signs on to, which does not address the matter. We did have a meeting with Minister Bennett up in northwest Saskatchewan when she was there to visit La Loche, and particularly on the Ila Lacrosse boarding school, which is quite unique in itself. And so it's not day scholars, it's the people, I shouldn't say like you, but most people, when they talk about Métis and Métis residential schools, just talk about day schools.
Sorry,
yeah.
just to be correct, I said the Métis and the day scholars. I didn't say that it was the same.
No,
so
that's
I
okay.
don't want you to
Okay.
think that I
Okay.
didn't.
But most people, when they talk about day schools, not residential schools. And there aren't that many Métis residential schools. And so I don't think you can deal with them both at the same time. You have to deal with residential schools and, look at day schools as well, the same way that they are for First Nations people. And I know there's schools in the Northwest Territories that were left out in, I believe, in Labrador. So there are quite a number. I don't think we can now expect to get in at the tail end of this process. I think that work is over. I think there's going to have to be, a new agreement with those people that have been left out, at least in terms of the Métis, residential schools. And of course, day schools should be addressed as well, but Métis residential schools definitely need to be addressed.
Have there been any steps to deal with this, or is this something that's part of the desire for the Métis to have action from the new government?
Well, nothing concrete has come out of it yet, except there was a meeting where that issue was discussed, and there is a willingness on the part of the Minister Bennett to have a look at that, have a real look at it. And I did speak on the Ila Lacrosse boarding school with Premier Wall last week, again revisiting that whole issue. And there's I think, hesitancy for them to look at it and not wanting to set any kind of precedent. So I think, we're quite a long ways off yet in resolving that. But certainly the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, its reports really, I don't think will do any benefit to the Métis Nation.
Thank you for that. Mr. Obed, one of the issues that we've certainly heard about is the issue of food insecurity in the North. And we have seen across the North the issues of problems with nutrition north. Certainly in my region, it's a huge issue. I'm looking at the main estimates that were put out for this year that say there would be a $14.5 million cut to Nutrition North. Now, the new government has promised a $10 million top-up to Nutrition North, but if that cut stays in place, we're still looking, the way I count, some $4 million shortfall. Has there been any discussion with the new government about whether or not that shortfall is going to continue, or what do we need to do to make sure that we end the terrible food insecurity in the northern communities?
Thank you for the question. I have been in conversations with Minister Bennett about the Nutrition North program, not specifically about the dollar amounts, because I think that's a secondary issue. The primary issue is the purpose of the program. If the purpose of the program is that it's a social program and that 100% of the funds should go to the people who need it in Inuit Nunangat and other northern and remote communities, then we need the program to be completely transparent and completely accountable. And I don't think that we are there with the current program that's in place. A point-of-sale rebate is a marketing tool, but it is not an accountability mechanism in the way that it has been utilized. And until we fix these systemic problems that make the Nutrition North program open to interpretation, I think people will continue to say that it isn't working for them and that they demand a better Nutrition North program. We are very thankful that there is such a large social program that exists to combat the 70% food insecurity that Inuit face in Inuit Nunangat. So I would never want to give the impression that we are not thankful for the subsidy. I would say that the animosity and anger towards the program is rooted in the fact that what Indigenous people can sign on to something that they don't necessarily know the structure of to its core. So fix accountability and transparency of the program, and I'm sure you will have more buy-in no matter what the amount.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. Well, I would have gone on to the suicide issue, which I think was much more than 50 seconds, so I guess I'll just have to leave it then.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to Mike Basio, and Mike, as we mentioned, will have a shortened 4-minute. Yeah, thanks.
I have so many questions I want to ask, but to start with Mr. Obed, because I think I have I'm hoping a short question. Under self-determination, I know you spoke about self-determination, and I couldn't really get my head around how it's working. Maybe that's the problem, part of the problem. But under, as far as education, healthcare, resource extraction, and the environment, how much self-determination is there for the Inuit community to actually have control over their territory? And control over these programs to determine we're going to define the curriculum, we're going to determine what resource extraction happens, we're going to determine the environmental policies that as to how that extraction will occur, and determine the delivery of health care.
Okay. This gives me an opportunity to talk about our vision statement, which is Canadian Inuit are prospering through self-determination and unity. So ITK is a vehicle for self-determination for Inuit, and the expression of self-determination, say at this table, is that Inuit have a chance to speak to you clearly without any limitation about the priorities that we have and the way in which we would like to interact and work with you. Sometimes on the other side, on the federal side, there is an assumption that the federal government or any number of government levels can decide for Inuit what is best for Inuit, or can interpret based on statistics or other measures of what things will or will not work, such as the Nutrition North program. The fact that Inuit are not participating in the eligible items for the program and defining what those eligible items are shows that we have a lack of self-determination in the way in which that program runs. Canada is deciding what healthy foods will be subsidized and will be on our store shelves. And in this era, in this time, we expect to have participation in the way in which those major decisions are made and which affect our lives. So in just about any different way, whether it's the implementation of land claim agreements or the ability to represent ourselves and have the government respect the way Inuit represent ourselves, are things that are works in progress, and we're always driving towards higher goals and aspirations. We have limitations to self-determination now, especially in the way that our colonial history and all of the hurts of the past are still affect our people today. We talk about it through historical trauma and intergenerational trauma, where the dysfunction that we see in our society is often linked to times when Inuit were brought off the land and coerced into communities, or our children were sent away to residential school, or our dogs were killed, or our loved ones were sent away for tuberculosis treatment and never came back and weren't told what happened to them. All of these things people still have to overcome, and I think a big challenge to our self-determination is our ability to get over that colonial process. And that's why we're here talking about how programs can be improved and the priorities that we have as a people that we know will get us towards the path that we need to be.
I guess I don't have time for my question to the Métis.
Thank you, Mr. Obed, and Mr. Obed and Mr. Chartier and Mr. Weinstein. On behalf of all of the committee members, thank you very much for joining us today and allowing us to learn from you. I apologize for the shortened time out of our control, I'm afraid. However, I would like to invite you to leave behind your notes if you'd like to, or if you'd like to submit something to us after the fact. We would very much welcome that, and I even encourage individual committee members to continue a dialogue outside of these walls too, if that's helpful to anyone. So warm thank you to you all, and we'll just suspend for a couple of minutes while we say farewell and welcome our next guest. Thank you.
You bang the gavel, so does that mean we're in session?
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to the committee today, and thanks very much for making time for us. We're very grateful that you could be here. We're going to dive right in here, and I think you heard the explanation in the first half of the meeting about how the timing works, and we have an established order so that our committee can ask you some questions. And given that we lost some time today, I'm in the unenviable position of having to be a little bit firm with timing. So you'll see me getting your attention when you have 1 minute left for answering with a yellow card, and when we're right out of time with a red card. So I apologize for the formality of that. So. We're going to hear now from the National Association of Friendship Centers, and in particular, Christopher Shepard, the Vice President, and Jeffrey Sear, Executive Director. And please correct me if I mispronounced your name.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Please, you have the floor.
Atili Hyde, distinguished members of the Standing Committee, Chair of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. It's an honor and a privilege to appear before you, and I thank you for this opportunity to share with you the work of the Friendship Center movement and the National Association of Friendship Centers. Before I begin, I wish to acknowledge the Algonquin Nation, upon whose traditional territory we are meeting today. My name is Christopher Shepard. I'm Inuit. I'm originally from Postville, Nunatsiavut, but I now live and work in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I grew up in the Friendship Center movement, having been involved in their Aboriginal Youth Council, and I'm currently in my first term as Vice President of the National Association of Friendship Centers, also known as the NAFC. Accompanying me today is Mr. Jeffrey Sear, a proud Métis from Manitoba and the NAFC's Executive Director, as well as Pamela Ort, who's behind me, NAFC's Director of Research and Special Projects. With our time together, I would like to give you a brief overview of the Friendship Center movement, the NAFC, and urban Indigenous population in Canada. I would also like to share with you some of the NAFC's strategic priorities and provide you with some examples of the critical work that the NAFC, our provincial and territorial affiliates, and key partners are doing to support Indigenous people in urban settings. Lastly, I would like to highlight the NAFC's priorities for the 42nd Parliament and share my perspectives as to how each of you can support the Friendship Centre movement to advance our goals of reconciliation, improving Canada's social infrastructure, and to advance social finance opportunities for Aboriginal people living in urban environments in Canada. And of course, time permitting, I will do my best to respond to any questions that you may have. I would like to begin by stating some facts with you to set the context for the work of the Friendship Centre movement. As you may know, 75% of Canada's Indigenous people live off reserve. Nearly 60% live in urban areas. Further, the Indigenous population is growing at a faster rate than the Canadian average. This means that there are approximately 840,000 Indigenous people living in Canadian cities. The Canadian Indigenous population is also young, with approximately 50% being under the age of 24. This presents a tremendous opportunity for Canada's future social, cultural, and economic development. However, as you have heard from previous presentations, some Indigenous youth live in challenging social and economic circumstances. Since the 1950s, Friendship Centres have become professional service delivery experts with extensive experience, continual innovation, and deep partnerships with provinces and territories, civil society, and the private sector. The Friendship Centre movement is the country's most significant off-reserve Indigenous service delivery infrastructure. For over half a century, Friendship Centres have helped urban Indigenous people access the vital services they need to succeed in urban settings across Canada. Friendship Centres understand the challenges facing our communities, and their unique wraparound service delivery model ensures we are equipped to tackle them. Across the country, Friendship Centres provide culturally appropriate programs and services for Indigenous people living in urban centres and have become a place for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to come together to share traditions and to learn from one another. Friendship Centres are a significant part of Canada's social infrastructure backbone, with more than 2 million client contacts annually, serving Canada's most vulnerable urban Indigenous populations. By creating a space for Indigenous people in urban settings, Friendship Centres provide culturally adapt wraparound services and have been catalysts for reconciliation in Canada since their earliest days. The NAFC is a national association created by Friendship Centres in Canada in 1972, and to be the voice of its members nationally and internationally. The NAFC's membership is now comprised of 7 provincial or territorial associations and 118 Friendship Centres across Canada, including many in your ridings. The NAFC has a long and unique relationship with the Government of Canada. For the past 30 years, the NAFC has been the administrator of national programs delivered to Friendship Centres and other Indigenous organizations on behalf of the Government of Canada. While a not-for-profit network, rather than a politically representative organization, the NAFC enjoys a productive relationship with many other Indigenous organizations. In partnership with the Government of Canada, the National Association of Friendship Centres is now administering the delivery of $43 million in programs and services under a realigned urban Aboriginal strategy. This funding has assisted Friendship Centres and other urban Aboriginal service delivery organizations to not only increase services, but also to build and expand partnerships. With a range of partners, including all levels of government, nonprofit organizations, the private sector, and the charitable and philanthropic sectors to support Indigenous people living in urban centres to achieve their goals. Through these partnerships, Friendship Centres have been successful in leveraging funds. In fiscal year 2014-15, Friendship Centres leveraged for every federal dollar invested by a ratio of 7-to-1. I would now like to walk you through some of the NAFC's priorities and highlight some of the initiatives that are being implemented to advance these priorities and address the challenges that are experienced by some Indigenous people in Canada's urban centres. In June 2015, the NAFC launched Action for Indigenous Women, a comprehensive initiative to end violence against Indigenous women and girls. Action for Indigenous Women builds on proven, culturally relevant Friendship Center movement initiatives to provide support and change the conditions that lead to violence. This was done through the creation of A4IW Live, a digital community for Indigenous youth, and the expansion and promotion of newjourneys.ca, an online resource created by the NAFC supporting Indigenous people who have or are planning to relocate to the city. The NAFC hosts the Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network Secretariat, which is a research network of urban Indigenous communities, policymakers, academics, engaging in community-driven research with the goal of contributing to a better quality of life for urban Indigenous people in urban centers. Social innovation and social finance present tremendous tools with which to build on those strategic relationships to develop new and, just as importantly, scale up and scale out existing initiatives so that they can have broader impact. In British Columbia, the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centers has undertaken a number of initiatives to move social innovation and social finance forward. My colleague Paul Lacerte, the Executive Director of the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centers, has spoken extensively about these opportunities. In Quebec, the Regroupement des Centres d'Amitié Autochtone de Quebec has a history of bringing together stakeholders, civil society, and the provincial and federal governments to address social and economic development issues. The Val-d'Or Native Friendship Centre has developed co-op housing for First Nations families. Here in Ontario, the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres has also been working with key stakeholders to develop concrete social enterprise and social financing initiatives, including a program that provided training and development to support friendship centres to build capacity and assist in developing local social enterprise ventures. As we collectively look ahead 2 weeks from today to the first budget of the new government and beyond, I would like to share with you the priorities of the Friendship Centre movement for this 42nd Parliament. The Friendship Centre movement will support communities and grieving families as the work of the National Public Inquiry on Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women is formally established and carries out its critical work. The NAFC will continue to work with all partners to achieve reconciliation in Canada by implementing the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Friendship Centre movement looks forward to working with the government and opposition parties to improve the lives of urban Indigenous people in Canada. This will be achieved through core funding investments in Friendship Centres so that they continue to have the capacity to operate and to meet the needs of these communities. It will also be achieved by committing infrastructure funding and investing in Friendship Centres. Retrofitting, fixing, expanding, and reinvigorating these pillars of the community not only provides employment while increasing sustainability and accessibility, it also provides safe community spaces for some of the most vulnerable members of Canadian society. In closing, I would like to reaffirm that there are community-based solutions to complex problems, and Friendship Centres are harnessing creativity, energy, and knowledge that can unlock new ideas and new thinking that will lead to enduring social change and contribute to the full inclusion of Indigenous people in Canada's economic, cultural, and social fabric. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Shepherd. And we'll go right into the presentation from the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples and then follow that with questions. So please, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I thank you for inviting me here today. And I first also would like to acknowledge the Algonquin People Territory, whose traditional ancestral homelands we are assembled here today. Pardon me. I have prepared before this committee and appeared, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. I have appeared before this committee and other standing committees in the past, and this will be my first under this Liberal government. But in way of introducing myself, I am a Treaty Mi'kmaq from Millbrook First Nation in Nova Scotia. Throughout my life, I have been involved in advocating for the rights of Indigenous peoples, and I intend to continue doing so for many years to come. In 2000, I served as National Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples for 6 years, up to 2006. I returned to the Congress in 2011 when I was elected as Vice Chief, and I remained in that position for a year. And now in September 2015, I was re-elected for the 4th time as National Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. I am pleased to say that I am back. For those of you who may not know us, let me tell you a little bit about the organization. The Congress of Aboriginal Peoples is one of 5 national Indigenous organizations that is recognized by the Government of Canada and by provincial and territorial governments, including international community as well. For 45 years, since 1971, the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, formerly known as the Native Council of Canada, is a national Indigenous representative organization that has represented the interests of the Métis, off-reserve Indians, status Indians, and non-status Indigenous peoples living in rural, remote, urban, and isolated areas throughout Canada, including the Inuit of southern Labrador. CAP has been at the forefront of issues that matter most to Indigenous peoples for many years. Some examples are: CAP fought to ensure that the word Métis was included in the Constitution during the constitutional talks of 1982. In fact, it was our former leader, Mr. Harry Daniels, who was widely accredited for getting Métis in the Constitution. We were also successful in 1999 when the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on the Corbier case and declaring that all bands holding elections under the Indian Act would be required to extend voting rights to their band members living off reserve. In January 2013, the Federal Court of Canada affirmed the position that CAP had fought for since 1971, that the Métis and non-status are Indians under Section 9124 of the Constitution Act 1867. This historic ruling granted long overdue recognition on equality to over 600,000 of Canada's forgotten Indigenous peoples. We now await a final decision from the Supreme Court. Fundamentally, CAP seeks to ensure that all Indigenous people have equal access to programs and services across the country, and that our Indigenous and treaty rights, as recognized under Section 35 in Canada's Constitution Act of 1982, are given equal protection regardless of residence or Indian Act status. I would also like to provide you with a quick overview of how the Congress operates and what we do. CAP works closely with its provincial and territorial organizations, referred to as PTOs, and advocates on their behalf on the national level. Each of our PTOs are a provincially or territorially incorporated organization that provides research and advocacy support to their members and carries out a range of programs and services for their constituents. Our Youth Council, with the ever-growing Indigenous youth population, CAP is committed to ensuring that the necessary tools and supports are in place to enable our youth to live successful and productive lives. Our Aboriginal Skills and Employment Strategy, assets. Indigenous peoples face a number of challenges when entering the labor market, including constitutional, jurisdictional, and geographical gaps. The Assets Program, which started in 1999, fills those gaps by providing skills training, employment counseling, wage subsidies, and self-employment assistance. Our 3rd annual National Grassroots Engagement Tour. The Grassroots Engagement Tour is an opportunity for Indigenous peoples living off reserve in rural, urban areas to engage in town hall-style events and discuss issues that matter most to them. This year's tour began in Victoria, BC, and to date, we have made 9 stops in communities across Canada. Another 13 town halls are scheduled or in the planning stages in the coming weeks. From these sessions, we have identified themes that best represent the concerns of our constituents, including housing, education, and the Harry Daniels court challenge that is before the Supreme Court. Now I would like to turn our attention to the promises made in the Liberal platform during this recent election. We are hopeful that this government wants a renewed relationship that includes all Indigenous peoples, regardless of where they choose to live. The Congress is also committed to working in close partnership with the government and all national, regional, and community Indigenous organizations to bring about the much-needed change and recognition for our Indigenous peoples. This is what real partnership must look like. The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised real change. The Prime Minister also committed to a new nation-to-nation process that will renew the relations between Canada and all Indigenous peoples. In fact, the mandate letters that went out to all cabinet ministers contained specific priorities and directives for each portfolio, and also wording on the Prime Minister's overall expectations. Let me read one excerpt. I made a personal commitment to bring new leadership and a new tone to Ottawa. No relationship is more important to me and to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples. It is time for a renewed nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. I also want to reiterate what we have said in the past with respect to nationhood. Traditionally, the Indigenous peoples in Canada identified with their own specific nations of peoples, such as mine, which is Mi'kmaq. There are Maliseet, Mohawk, Ojibwe, Chippewan, and there are many more. These are examples of some of the 60 or so nations of Indigenous peoples in Canada. The reality is that Indigenous nations of peoples have been systematically divided by the federal government through Indian policy, the disinheritance of Indigenous peoples' birthright identity, and the dispossessing of their access to their lands and their resources. Today we have countless classifications for Indian, far too many and far too confusing. For example, we have status Indians, non-status Indians, off-reserve Indians, on-reserve Indians, registered Indians, treaty Indians, band members, non-band members, beneficiaries, non-beneficiaries, and so on. This list now includes distinct and non-distinct classifications of who is an Indian. Who is an Indian or an Aboriginal, Indigenous person? The definition is very clear under Section 35 of the Constitution Act. I quote, "The Aboriginal peoples of Canada includes the Indian, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada." The Constitution was meant to be inclusive, not exclusive. However, under this new government's commitment to a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples across Canada, the big question being asked by many of our people is, where do urban and rural Indigenous people fit into the government's concept of nation-to-nation relationships? Back in December 13, 2015, Christine Smith Martin, the executive director of the Vancouver Aboriginal Transformative Justice Services Society, said to a CBC Vancouver radio host, and I quote, "I'm not going to lie. I think we're a little concerned about how this is going to roll out in the urban Aboriginal community. It leaves out a huge population of approximately 65% of us who don't live on our reserves. And not many of us have connections to the bands that we come from. Some of our people who live here in Vancouver have never been to the band that they come from, let alone be active participants in it."
Mr. Dory, I'm afraid we're out of time. If you wanted to have a concluding remark, in the interest of fairness, we need to move on to the questions.
Okay, thank you.
For rushing.
I expect to be meeting soon with the Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Indigenous Northern Affairs, to talk about our own nation-building strategy, the Congress's political accord with the government, and the roadmap for renewal and reconciliation. This is how we see our government-to-government relationship or process being developed. We propose a roadmap sets out 7 themes of topics for action: economic development, education and lifelong learning, governance and accountability for and within Indigenous communities, family security, including child and family support systems on and off reserve, Indigenous and treaty rights, including access to those rights by the Indigenous people regardless of their status or residency, implementation of international standards for the rights of Indigenous people, which include mainly the Declaration of the UN on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the ILO's Convention number 169 on the Rights of Indigenous and Tribal Peoples, an assessment of preparation for and response to the court's decision in relation to the inclusion of Métis and non-status Indians within Section 9124 of the Constitution Act 1987, the Daniels decision.
Mr. Dory, I would welcome you to leave behind your notes, and that would become a formal part of the record. But I'm afraid we really must move into the questions.
Okay,
now.
if I might just make one final point for your information.
Thank you.
As of today,
Just point of order. If that happens, then we have to discuss time.
Yes, we do, and I plan to do that.
Chair, because if that's how you're going to run the meetings, then we're going to have to start to move to other means of dividing up the time afterwards if there isn't the time.
Please go ahead, Mr. Dorian, with your final remark.
final remark is, as of today, the Congress has gone through a rebranding process. We will now be the Indigenous Peoples Assembly of Canada.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we go to committee questions, I have a question for the committee itself. We're doing our best to make up half an hour of lost time here. I have from one or two members a willingness to shorten the next 7-minute questions to 5 minutes, so that the committee can still turn to the business of two motions after our guests we say goodbye to our guests. Can I just test the willingness of the committee to switch to 5-minute questions coming up? I see assent for that. Thanks so much. And the next question goes to Gary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I had the opportunity last Friday to visit a Native Child and Family in Scarborough, and I was quite impressed with the amount of work that they do. What I want to get from you in the sense of as you know, the Prime Minister said that we're looking to build a nation-to-nation relationship with our Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis peoples. What role do you think the people living in urban settings can play in setting that relationship?
I think for us, friendship centers have always been places for people to go regardless of what background that they come from. If you're an Aboriginal individual and you need support for something in your community, you could go there and you would be respected for who you were as an Aboriginal person. So for us, we've treated every person that's come through our doors with respect. And I think for friendship centers, it's about we've always recognized those things, and we're glad to support anyone who wants to build relationships. Because for us, we're not a politically representative organization. We are an organization that is literally based on supporting the communities that they're in. No matter what they need, we've had Indigenous people walk through the door. We've had non-Indigenous people walk through the door. And when we talk about reconciliation for us, we've been doing this work for so long because we've been, for a lot of communities, the safe place where a non-Aboriginal person or non-Indigenous person could go to learn about that culture and people in a place of respect. So we're not politically representative, so the nation-to-nation piece for us is we look at it differently. And because of the way that we treat everyone who walks through the door of a friendship center, maybe we have something to sort of share in that regard to how we work with all the different people that walk through our doors. But we do it every day.
In terms of to both the National Chief as well as the friendship centers, what concrete measures can the federal government do in protecting Indigenous languages and cultures, and particularly promoting it within the overall Canadian framework?
Yeah. Well, for one thing is, there has to be, I guess, a real closer working relationship with provincial governments if you're talking about the people that we advocate for and represent because of the jurisdiction of education within the provinces. However, having said that, that's one of the big issues relative to the Daniels case and why we took this to court is that fiduciary responsibility. It's already been declared by the courts. We've been fighting and arguing for this for 45 years, that the fiduciary duty and responsibility for all Aboriginal or Indigenous people should rest with the federal government under Section 9124 of the British North America Act. Once that's resolved, if in fact we get that declaration, and there is a fiduciary duty, there is a right for us to be consulted and negotiated with. Those are the primary kinds of questions that we will get at, and we will expect to be addressed by the federal government.
Mr. Chair, may I add a few comments? So one of the ways to get at Indigenous language and cultural transmissions is A, to provide the space, and B, the programming, and to facilitate that take-up in communities. So friendship centers have looked forward to this government both in an infrastructure context and a programming context to facilitate that. Let's provide the safe spaces where cultural transmission occurs, where we engage elders and youth in the transmission of that knowledge, which includes languages, very importantly, and Indigenous spirituality within that frame. Being a little more open under the Indigenous Languages Program, formerly or currently with the Department of Heritage, expanding that capacity is also critical. So that's a minute, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will go to Arnold Viersen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. My questioning is for the, is it IPAC now? Is that how we're going to refer to it there? Yeah, so you touched upon your work as the Congress of Indigenous Peoples off reserve, essentially, and how that you represent a whole host of people. How does, like, the role of elders in your community, how does that connect you to consultations, and how do the role of elders shape I guess or how would that influence the community altogether? I'm slowly learning all of this. I've got 14 First Nations in my riding of Peace River Westlock, and they all tell me that the elders is the cultural. They're the people that really hold on to the culture and then propel it forward. And so I'm just wondering how that plays in with your organization, the role of elders.
Well, that's a very good question. You know, two of the main priorities, I guess, as we progress on our work within the Congress, is both our elders and our youth. And so we have a youth council. We counsel with elders just about every time we meet. Whenever there's a major a meeting or an annual assembly or whatever, we invite the elders in. We provide rooms for them to meet and discuss our relative issues and give advice on. That's taking place within all of our affiliate organizations. At the provincial and territorial level as well. So it is very important. We believe strongly in the things of our culture, 7 generations, and respect for our people who are the keepers of the knowledge. Oral tradition within our peoples, our communities, is extremely important.
And that seems that works quite well off reserve as well as on reserve.
Yes, it does. With the exception for us is it's always a resource issue because our people are scattered about. So and to show respect for our elders, we have to provide for them, and it's the resources that's available is often a big issue.
Thank you. So as you may know, that the beginning of this year, there was a special committee on physician-assisted suicide, and they held meetings with stakeholders from around the country. There was only 2 Indigenous witnesses that appeared, and both expressed concern with the lack of consultation of national Indigenous organizations. Was CAP or IPAC invited to take part in these committee consultations?
No, we weren't.
Okay. and I know that the end of life care and like palliative care and and suicide, these are critical issues for Aboriginal people or Indigenous people. Have you had consultations with your membership on these particular issues?
Not to any great length, and again, it goes back to the issue of resources. But you hit on a point. I mean, it's a known problem. The high rate of suicides within the Indigenous population of the country. It's about time that we were provided with the kinds of necessary resources to be able to effectively address those concerns and deal with our communities.
So, I guess this is a fairly broad question. How can the government ensure that a national Indigenous organization such as yourselves have stronger voice in nation-to-nation consultations?
Well, unfortunately, because of time, I couldn't get into that. But in the last few pages, when I'm talking about in the presentation, the political accord that the Congress has with the federal government. It's been in place for over 20 years now, and it lists out a lot of the key agenda items. Health and housing and education, training, and all these. We're looking for and have met with Minister Bennett to start that process, get it, fueled again, and this is the way that we want to be able to address these things. So support for the political accord, and what we call a roadmap is a 3-year plan set out as to how we'll implement these things and address these kinds of concerns.
And where can I find that 3-year plan?
You can get it through our office. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all my time.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, also, if you're comfortable to leave your notes or,
yes, sure.
convey us whatever other briefing you'd like to have. The next question, 5 minutes, Charlie Angus, please.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank both presenters, and I want to say certainly the Native Friendship Center in Timmins is an extraordinary tool for good for the entire community. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to ask questions as time has run out on us, and we have a motion that because of the health crisis in Treaty 9 that I have to bring to the agenda today. So I apologize that I'm not able to ask questions. We can follow up later. But Mr. Chair, while I have the floor, I apologize for bringing it up today as opposed to our planning meeting. I have a family emergency on Thursday. I cannot be here, but it's not the emergency we're dealing with right now in Treaty 9 that was called. That started with the wife of Norman Sheweabik, who died because there was no oxygen in their medical center. The chiefs of Mushkegowuk have called for a state of emergency. We lost another young person Saturday night. That's 2 in the last week. So I'm asking the committee, given the seriousness of this, and when a state of emergency is declared anywhere else in the country, things happen. When it happens in Indian country, it seems that there's no response, and that's what I'm hearing from the leadership. They're very frustrated. I think it would be a positive message to invite them. I had mentioned bringing Chief Isidore Day and leadership of Anishinaabe Nation, which would be Alvin Fiddler. I would suggest having a special meeting, a one-day meeting with the 2-hour period. I would suggest April 12th because we're going to be leaving, and then we have the budget. I would suggest it would be good to invite Jonathan Solomon, the chief of Mushkegowuk, the board chair of the Sioux Lookout Health Authority, who could probably provide some technical advice, and Chief Wayne Muniz from Niskatanga, which is also dealing with the heart of the crisis. So I put it for my colleagues if we could bring that forward and get that so when we come back we have something to show that we're actually taking these issues on as they happen, and that we can use our committee to be responsive and provide some hopefully some solutions.
Okay. I just want to, for the benefit of our guests, we've got it slightly off script, but it's within Charlie Angus's prerogative to do that in such a meeting. It is an important motion, as you've heard. So is there any the debate on the motion or comment on the motion? Kathy McLeod?
We might be out of time.
So what's happened now is that the committee is seized of this motion, and before we can conduct any further business, we have to deal with the motion, ultimately with a vote or with a vote to defer debate. If there's no debate, we can move to. We have a speaking order. I'll add you, but Kathy McLeod is on.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate Mr. Angus bringing this to the table. I think it is a very important issue. I also want to sort of reflect, though, he's brought some other motions to the table, and we heard earlier in terms of the incredible rate of suicide, which I would suggest is also critically important. So, I mean, I like to go back to my original comments around the planning of committee business, the purpose of a subcommittee, and really believe that that is the place for these conversations to happen and the priorities to be set. So I'm not sort of saying that we should not do this, but I think we should do this within the framework of those other important things that need to be decided on, and that we do it, and we put some process around it. So for that reason only, I think that subcommittee, which I believe is meeting soon, needs to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Don Resnick.
Now, we know that there's a suicide epidemic in First Nation communities all across this country. There's suicide issues in communities that I represent in the Grand Council Treaty 3 area. There's suicide problems in Alberta. I knew when I was a prosecutor there, the communities. I know that the Anishinaabe Nation, who I'm well familiar with, because a lot of their people come to Thunder Bay, and I'm familiar with their leadership, have an issue and have declared a state of emergency. But it's over the last 10 years they've declared a lot of states of emergency over the suicide crisis. I'm not saying this isn't an issue that we should immediately discuss. But I don't think there's harm in putting it off a little bit to make sure we're inclusive of all the communities that are facing this crisis in Canada. That's just my addition. I would look at the people that we should invite here, because the issues that they face are similar right across this country. And a lot of it has to do with what's the relationship between the federal government and First Nation communities. So,
okay,
I wouldn't want to restrict it, is what I'm saying, to just these communities.
Sure. I didn't hear you, Charlie. Sorry.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, Mike, please.
Actually, I was going to say, I'd like to hear what Charlie has to say before I comment, if that's okay, and then I'll go after Charlie instead. Is it you all right with that, Charlie?
Certainly. Well, Don's right. There have been a lot of states of emergency. I can't count how many states of emergency I've seen, and nobody's done diddly squat. That's the reality. So they declare states of emergency, and they just wait till people give up. I brought a motion about the suicide crisis, and I was told, well, we can do that later. We're doing lessons 101, and that's good. But people are dying. So a state of emergency is declared, and we're going to say, well, there's emergencies everywhere. That could be the vote of this committee. I didn't bring it to the planning and priorities because I said I have a family emergency I have to be at on Thursday. I can't be there. But when you have a state of emergency declared and nothing's done, it sends a real message across the country. I think this meeting will open the door to the bigger discussion that's affecting the death rates. But we've had 600 plus kids in one part of my riding attempt to kill themselves since 2009. If that doesn't mean that we should be meeting on this, frick, I don't know what it would be. So this isn't to exclude anything else, but a state of emergency was declared, and they're asking for national leadership. So this is an opportunity. So I put it to a vote.
Mike, yeah.
I completely agree with where Charlie's coming from on this. This is a state of emergency. I think that we can still, there's no reason that we can't take this specific state of emergency and deal with it in and of itself, and still at the same time deal with the suicide crisis that exists in all First Nations, but deal with the state of emergency first, and then go to the suicide crisis that exists in all First Nations. I can't see why we can't do both. So I would, and I think that there's been a good amount of discussion, and I guess we've run out of time. I was going to say I'd like to put an end to the debate and have a vote to give Michael a chance to ask one final question, but I see we've already run out of time anyway. So I am in support of where Charlie's coming from, and think that we should put it to a vote.
Michael?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's appropriate to invite people to come and present to us, travel all this way, then hijack the meeting and then say, we're not going to listen to them. I waited a long time to have a discussion with the Friendship Center. I have a real interest in the work they do. And if this is the way we're going to do business, we need to be able to enforce, a process so that we don't bring people in so that we just leave them hanging.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mike. Mr. Angus.
Well, I just want to be clear here. The meeting ends at 5:30. So you might have lots of questions. You can take that up with the chair about how the meeting was decided. I had 5 minutes. I respectfully asked that I would use my 5 minutes to raise this because people are dying back home. If you have other questions, that has nothing to do with my 5 minutes. So you can call that hijacking all you want. I would say that you might take that up with the chair about the timing. But if you want to stay and talk to them afterwards, you have to get unanimous consent, and it doesn't happen at committees. So we had 5 minutes, and I used it for this. So I put it to a vote, and you can vote whatever way you want.
The choices before the committee now are to continue debate, to vote, or to defer debate.
I would move that we defer debate and go to the vote.
There's a motion to defer debate. Is there a seconder for that? We don't need a seconder. Okay. And do we move right to the vote then? Okay. So
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
Defer debate. That's a.
We adjourn debate until the next session when we're all
Okay,
together.
so we're not going to a vote for clarification.
No,
Thank
but
you.
we would go to a vote
So
to adjourn debate for today.
Thank you.
Sorry, no, sorry. I apologize. No, I wanted to go to a vote on the motion. I want to end debate and go to a vote on the motion.
Okay, so there are two motions on the floor now. We have a motion to adjourn debate that does not need a seconder, I'm told. So let's just hear the will of the committee on that. Is this showing you're in favor of deferral? Okay, so I'm seeing one, two. Is that a hand up, Michael?
I got a question. So if they're deferring debate, our presenters, then we should let them know that.
I'm afraid we're bound to the protocol and procedures of the committee, which means that until this motion is dealt with, our hands are tied and we have to dispense with this motion. But Michael, when we meet to do our housekeeping, we'll talk about this at that time to get a better process.
Chair, point of order. Mike Bossio can withdraw his motion. Mike, you have the power to withdraw your motion.
Yes, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Okay. And okay, so now we're back to the vote of the motion itself.
Point of order, Chair. Can he withdraw the motion after you have called for the vote?
You think it's a good question. Unanimous consent is required to withdraw the motion. So I will ask, is there unanimous consent for Michael's withdrawal of his motion? The motion was, Michael?
The original motion, and it was a mistake on my part, to be perfectly honest. I was through just inexperience that I thought that I was moving for a vote on Charlie's motion. Instead, I asked for a deferral on the vote, thinking that I was asking for a deferral on the motion, thinking I was actually asking to end debate so we could vote on Charlie's motion. So I apologize for the inexperience in doing that, but if you want to hold that against me, then go ahead.
So I would propose to the committee that we honor the intent of Mike's motion and not the way that we heard it. Can we agree that that's a? I'm asking for unanimous consent. Yeah. Okay. So the motion is withdrawn, and we can now vote on the motion itself. So let's, by show of hands, can we see who's in favor of Charlie's motion that was distributed to the committee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, what's the? You can ask for who's against. Okay, and then who can I? By show of hands, who is against the motion? 1, 2, 3. 3 against. 5 in favor, 3 against, and the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, what do we do with the timing and Michael's question?
It's up to you. I mean, the meeting's
Okay. Gary, very quickly.
I'm just wondering if we can extend discussion by maybe 5 minutes and allow Mr. McLeod to ask a question.
Yes. I would like to ask the committee's support in extending our debate by 5 minutes so that the last questioner, which is Michael McLeod, in our rotation can hear from our guests who are visiting us today. Is there consent with that?
I have to leave for another meeting, but if you want to stay, it doesn't bother me.
Thank you. Please, Michael.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for coming here today to present to us. I have been involved with the Friendship Center for a lot of years, and I see the importance of having a Friendship Center in the communities and the work that they've done. And I really appreciate the fact that they work independent of all other political organizations. And in a lot of cases, we're seeing the Friendship Center as the organization that is moving forward on many things in the communities, on the social end of things, dealing with and setting up community gardens, promoting languages, delivering programs that deal with suicide, also talking and doing things on the homelessness front, alcohol programs. And I worked historically in the NWT Friendship Center program, and I wanted to ask about adequateness of funding. I've seen what we initially were getting about 20 years ago, and then I've recently talked to members, and I was surprised at how little things have changed. Maybe you could just tell me a little bit about that.
I'd love to tell you about that. Thanks for asking the question. So frankly, Friendship Center programming funding levels haven't changed in roughly 30 years. Or since at least the mid to late 1980s, there's been some adjustment and realignment of what it was meant to do under different governments over time. But the basic level hasn't changed. We are having discussions with the current government about streamlining that programming so that it makes a little more clear sense. We've had some experience over the last number of years with it. And basically what we need to see is effectively the doubling of core funding. We have, as you can imagine, a ton of analysis of Friendship Center core funding needs and requests on an operational level across the country. It averages about $383,000. $383,700 is what the average is, actually. And somewhere on the lower end of the scale, somewhere on the higher end of the scale. Some Friendship Centers have 200 employees, some have 7. So, you have to put it into perspective. We are asking for a significant commitment to that programming base on core funding, and that makes all the difference in the world, that it leverages the partnerships that you talk about and all that other provincial funding, and a significant investment in infrastructure to some 238 buildings owned by Friendship Centers, by 119 Friendship Centers across this country. And we've had some positive conversations, and we're really looking forward to continuing that. We're a little concerned about time, as everyone is. We like to move a little bit quicker than we're moving. We understand it's a new government, and we understand that, and we're working with officials and trying to do as much homework as we can to put everything in people's hands to make it effective. We're having a huge impact on the lives of Indigenous people every day, every single day, from food to prenatal, postnatal, elder care, cultural transmissions, high school programming, suicide prevention, you name it, across the board. And we want to just continue to do that good work, essentially. So, and, stay out of the political fray and do our work. Thanks very much.
Okay, one quick question for the Indigenous peoples of Canada. The new title is I wasn't sure. I didn't know it was in the works, so I'm a little bit surprised, but congratulations. I hear you talking about a protocol, and I've heard a lot of Aboriginal governments talk about the nation-to-nation concept, and including the Kelowna Accord. Is your expectation to sign an actual agreement with the government? Is your expectation to see the Kelowna Accord as a separate agreement, or is it elements of the Accord brought forward and just a better working relationship?
Good question, and I can't give you a definitive answer because I don't know what even is being discussed or put out there. I've heard terms about a Kelowna-like agreement. I can tell you that I was the national head of the Congress of Aboriginal People at the Kelowna meeting, and I could not sign on support that agreement. And in particular because as mentioned many times, this distinction-based process based on Section 35, Indians, Inuit, and Métis, leaves so many people out, millions of people out, and that's why or I should say hundreds of thousands, that's the reason I referred to the word includes in my presentation here, because that was put in there to make sure nobody would be left out, and here we are with that situation. So that's the problem with it. And,
okay.
and I just would like to say, Mr. Chairman, in terms of any further information that members of this committee would like to see, I will make myself available one-on-one. All you do is got to get in touch with me, and I'll come talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for making time today and for bearing with us in our unexpectedly shortened meeting. I very much appreciate your forbearance there. Thank you to the committee members for agreeing to stay a few minutes late. And I have a motion to adjourn. Adjourned. Thank you.